Have you ever found yourself at a roadblock with Dungeons and Dragons? Maybe you've thought about becoming a dungeon master or a game master, and you're not really sure what that entails. Or maybe even you've thought about what class may be the strongest and why they are the strongest.
And maybe you've played every class of Dungeons and Dragons, but you haven't played every subclass and you've overlooked some. Or maybe that new interesting character that you've daydreamed about for weeks isn't as fun to play in game. Here at Theoretical Insights of D&D, me and Rob are going to be discussing some insights and theories of Dungeons and Dragons. So let's get ready
And roll for insight.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Rob.
All right, Rob. We got the fighter out of the way.
And we've talked about customization.
And we've talked about the power gap. We've talked... these are all similar but vast different topics in broad general areas of D&D.
And we know with the way that our minds work, we're probably going to be jumping all over the place, really.
Yeah. And I don't even jump.
Barely ever.
Yeah.
So I figured now would probably be a good time if we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
It's important for the listeners to understand why we play, how we were introduced, and how we've...
Why we're still playing.
Yeah. I was first introduced to D&D with 3.5. I was up late one night, and I was video calling with a friend. I think this was when Skype was big. This is years ago. And he's like, "Hey, you ever played D&D?" And I'm like, "Nah." And he's like, "You want to play?" And I'm like, "I don't know how to play it, but sure." It was late at night, had nothing better to do. And we did a little one-shot, one-session thing. Did the Skyrim opening, I'm a prisoner, and something attacks, and I escape. I rolled up a half-orc monk. And
The half-orc monk.
yeah,
Huh, that's interesting.
It was. I don't remember a whole lot about that game, but I do remember the quotes. And anytime you have quotes from a game, that's an inside joke with other players or DMs, it's so much
something
fun.
went right.
Yeah. Now I can say those quotes, and it's not going to make a lick of sense for the listeners. Quote from that is, "We know what a monk is, we just don't know what a monk is."
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we also have these great moments. I hacky sacked a goblin into a pit of fire.
And it's about the only way to do it is with a monk.
Yeah, it was a great time. And then after that, didn't play D&D for a little bit, and then 5th edition came out when I was in high school, and that was really popular with all the geeks at school. And I was real excited to try out these new races that I haven't seen before, and classes like Warlock, Dragonborn, Tiefling, or Tiefling, however you pronounce it. And believe it or not, the second time I ever played D&D, I ran a game.
That's crazy to think of, because eventually I want to get a sit down and talk about what it's like to DM as well, because before we get into that topic, it's not easy.
No, it is not. When I DM'd, I didn't know the rules at all. Because to me, Dungeons & Dragons, when I first started, was like, oh, you just tell a story, you do, you roll some dice, and the dice tell you what happens.
And then you discovered the bottom of the iceberg.
Well, I was rolling, or having my players roll for everything. I
Yeah.
was not playing 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I was playing, Dice Simulator, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I was making them roll for attack, and I was making them roll to dodge an attack.
Wow.
Armor class, didn't know what that was. I didn't know what hit dice were either. I thought that's how much damage you did with your fist. And so I'm like, so why is it that your fist does more damage than a longsword?
Yeah.
But as I progressed through the years, watched some games on YouTube, I learned the rules, and I'm like, oh, I did that entirely wrong. But we still had fun, messing with the stupid rules that I had. We pretty much rolled for anything.
And that's really the whole idea behind Dungeons and Dragons, I think. And I think maybe that's what Gary Gygax originally had in mind, was something for him to sit down and just go through an adventure, because the books of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were out.
Yeah.
So were the Chronicles of Narnia. these grand and epic adventures, the Odyssey, heck, even even some of the adventures from the Bible.
Oh yeah.
People going out. Just gave this opportunity with Dungeons and Dragons for other people to experience that firsthand through their characters from like a third person camera point of view.
Yeah. And man, I'll tell you, Dungeons and Dragons for me is just fun.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on why it is, and I probably will never be able to tell you why I love Dungeons and Dragons or role playing games in general. But it's just something about making a character, having a story with them, and watching that story progress.
Well, I've been playing now for, Lord have mercy, 5 years. 5 years have already gone by. And I know there are a lot of people out there that have been playing decades and know a lot more about the game than I do. But originally, it was the game that Will was running at
A good friend of ours
Yeah.
at a local game store.
And Eric, who's been on the show, pretty much begged me to try it out because we had gotten pretty close. And he introduced me to D&D Beyond, and I went on and I built a Minotaur. I think I built a Minotaur Barbarian.
Something big,
just something big, something interesting. Because I was like, I mean, this is who I usually play in a role-playing game. I want to be on the front line. I want to be able to take some damage, and I want to be able to dish some out.
Yeah.
Of course, I deleted it and everything. I never thought I'd get into it. And finally, he convinced me to come down to the game shop and sit down and try it out. I had no character ready. I had planned originally to just sit and watch. And unknown to me, one of the guys didn't show up. So the next thing I know, I have his character sheet in front of me, and I'm playing for the first time in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the greatest experience of a game that I've ever had.
Yeah.
It was just this welcoming tone and feeling in this group that was, I know you have no idea what you're doing, but we'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
Some hilarity ensuing by me saying that I the character I was playing grabs the guard in a headlock, steals his mace off his waist, and then decides to try and crotch shot him with his own mace.
It was when I was a player in that game.
You were in the room with me.
Yeah.
In game. And we tried to jump out the window, and I rolled a nat 1 and smacked my head on the window so hard that I almost went unconscious.
Yeah, and then I threw you out the window.
You threw me out the window to get us to safety.
Yeah, we got to safety. We did.
That's something that, up until I take my last breath, the events of that maybe 30 seconds in game, but 45 minutes sitting at the table, those events will be forever ingrained in my brain.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like the people that are really big into the video games of, say, Skyrim, Oblivion, Kingdoms of Amalur, World of Warcraft, D&D Online, anything.
Bard's Tale's another
Exactly.
oldie but goldie.
Everybody has a certain memory
Yeah.
that they're like, I'll probably never experience that again.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for instance, Skyrim. Being able sitting there and going into Skyhaven's temple and seeing all these old etchings and the stone carve of the story of Alduin and the fall of the dragons and the resurgence of him. That's something that's always going to be, when I think of Skyrim, that's something that I'm going to think about. And Dungeons and Dragons gives me the opportunity to be able to think back on memories because I'm a sentimental guy.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to think back on memories and realize that I didn't experience alone. It wasn't just me sitting in front of that TV experiencing it alone. It was me with a group of 4 to 5 other people experiencing it. And if I'm still talking to that person, being like, hey, you remember that time? And being able to have a full-blown, laughter-filled conversation about it.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite memories from playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I was working at a camp in the summer, and I was into Dungeons and Dragons, and I got like a few of the other workers or staff to get in a small game of D&D. ran one session. It was pretty fun and whatnot. Then the next summer, I was trying to like start up another game, just for fun. It didn't work out. And then my third summer there, I wasn't planning on running a game, because it didn't work the summer before. But then, like, I think one or two of the staff like came to me and was like, "Hey, are you gonna run a game of Dungeons and Dragons?" And I was like, "I mean, if you want me to, I'm down." And it was a weird summer that time. We had a lot of excess free time, and so I got 6 people in a party. They were pretty much all new players. Some have been exposed to Dungeons and Dragons like beforehand, with like maybe a one shot that I did with them, like at the first summer or whatever. But they were pretty much all new players. We had one session. They were all first level. Guess what their first enemy was?
A werebear.
No, a Hydra.
Wow.
Yep, I had them roll on a random encounter table, and they rolled a 100 in the swamp encounters.
And they faced the Hydra.
Yep.
How'd that turn out?
They did very good. They were creative. I was lenient with them because they're
obviously
new players, and because I didn't want their characters to die. Also, character creation for that was wild.
Yeah, that's possibly as much fun as it is to play in a good campaign, it is just as much fun to sit down with your friends or your DM even and create a character from scratch.
Yeah, it was fun. But because they were new players, I was kind of like running around at different times whenever I had free time during the day and be like, "Hey, what kind of character you want to play? You want to cast spells? You want to be sneaky? You want to deal damage? You want to take damage? Stuff like that." And I was basically like, "Okay, well, this is the class you probably want to play then. And this is what I recommend, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to." And so I was kind of helping them create their characters. One of the players was like, "Listen, I just want a character who's purely chaotic. I just want chaos." And I'm like, "Okay, Kenku, Wild Magic Sorcerer."
Yep.
Right off the bat.
Yep.
But the first session was awesome. They really got into it. Like, when we first sat down, like, at this big table, they were, like, waiting around, and I was about to start, and they're like, "Hey, can we turn the lights off to get, like, mood lighting in here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we can." We turn the lights off. We pull up a lamp, lit up the table, so it's a little dark, and it was awesome. After that, 3 more people came in, so I'm running a party with 9 players, which was ridiculous.
Well, see, I remember I had something similar to happen to me, and it was your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you left to go to camp, and about a month before you left, you texted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to be going to camp this summer, so my game is going to be ending, and I was wondering if you might be able to run one while I'm gone." Sure. I had no idea what I was doing.
You took the mantle very well.
Well, I borrowed a lot from video games and other things, and even got the name for the dragon from Magic the Gathering. And now, granted, the basis of the story, you can look at Skyrim and say, "Yeah, I see where you got that from." But everything else in between, that was the hard part. Because I started off, because I love video games, I started off planning everything as quest by level.
Yeah.
So I was doing milestones, still am to this day, because the game that you're playing in now is the same story, just multiplied by a lot. And because right now on my Google Docs where I've written the campaign out is 18 pages, and I just now hit level 8.
Yeah.
I sat down, and within a week I had a campaign written from level 5 to 20. It wasn't very good. It was a lot of, okay, you find this out, so go here, go here, go here, go here, go here, get this bunch of combat, not a really whole lot of story progression, up until you get into the later levels of the original draft, to where originally, because this is not going to be in the game anymore, originally the party was going to find after killing the big bad, because we've already talked about, his name's Culligan and everything. After they kill the big bad, they're going to discover a prophecy, right?
Yeah.
And there's a certain somebody whose spirit shows up on the beach and takes them back in time. This is before discovering the prophecy. He says, there's things you need to know. Take my hand. They go back in time in like a dream, and they're sitting there with this person in a different form in another fight with Culligan.
Nice.
And they slay him then, and then when they start uncovering the prophecy, and I put like 4 or 5 parts in the prophecy, they discover that they were there and originally killed Culligan.
It's moments like that where
they were the original party that killed Culligan.
As a DM, it's always fun to imagine the future.
Plot twists are so much fun.
Yeah, there's sometimes I'll just be randomly thinking like I cannot wait for my big bad evil guy to show up in this game.
Yeah,
I cannot wait for them to fight him for the first time.
I cannot wait for them to think it's this one, but it's actually the one over here.
Yeah. But man, it's moments like that where there's these big moments, like plot twists, where you find out some information, or you just had a big fight and you win.
Yeah, and I've said it a few times. I'm really big into the roleplay aspect of it because I always viewed Dungeons and Dragons video games, writing a story or anything like that as an escape.
Yeah.
From dealing with life.
Yeah.
Because life's hard. So being able to do this and get a distraction for a few hours is always a good thing. No matter what you use, whether it's video games, Dungeons and Dragons, driving, reading a book, art, crocheting, art, whatever, is that the emotional toll.
Oh yeah,
that can happen before you joined in the campaign that I'm running now. They were in a village south of Hagenfall, and a group of spirits came to them at night in the hut that they were in, standing outside the window, and said, "Hey, look, there's something evil over in the swamp to the west. It killed us. We've been there for a while. Our spirits cannot pass on. Will you please go and look into it?" And the party says, "Well, yeah." Well, about that time they agree, a little girl's spirit walks around the corner dragging a teddy bear. And she says, "Will you please, if you're able to defeat him and we're at rest, will you please take my teddy bear to my daddy in Hagenfall?" Of course. They go, they deal with the necromancer in the swamp that has turned the wildlife into this dark energy. Had control of a few crocodiles. They wiped that, broke the curse that the necromancer had put on the swamp. The spirits were freed. The spirits said thank you, and later on they eventually get to Hagenfall with the teddy bear. They start asking around to see, okay, has anybody lost a daughter in the past month? Well, yeah, that guy down in the commoner section. You go down to the commons from the market district, and you take a left at the third road, and it's like the 4th house on the right. Cool, we'll go see him. When they get there, house is extremely run down. Some of the roof is falling off. The porch is collapsed on the right side. The grass is grown up, probably 4 foot tall. And they knock on the door, and they hear some shuffling on the inside, just a little. And the door opens slightly and just kind of peeks out and says, "Yes." And the player character holds up the teddy bear and says, "Are you so-and-so?" "Yeah, we found this, and we wanted to let you know that your daughter is at peace." And the door flies open, and I cried on command. Ooh. I had tears going down my face, acting like a father who had, lost his child, and everybody at the table had tears in their eyes, and 2 of them had them streaming down their face.
I'll tell you, it's moments where you can cry over a game that it's a good game.
Yes.
I've cried as a dungeon master, not on command, but because of just how beautiful a campaign ended. That 9-person party, yeah, they just completely disrupted my story.
Mm-hmm.
They killed the big bad evil guy, a little bit too early. Kind of my fault. I could have made him like teleport out or something,
It is what it is.
But and they kind of skipped over like a side boss that they were like supposed to defeat, then to get to the big bad evil guy. But so I upped the side boss. I made him powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crocodile, a homebrew creature who had player levels,
Wow.
monk and paladin.
Ooh, that's nasty.
Yeah, he was. The original creature I had in mind was a mix between like a big crocodile and a troglodyte. But after they defeated the big bad evil guy real soon, I was like, I got to up the stakes.
Yep.
So he became a huge bipedal crocodile monster.
Like Killer Croc.
Yeah.
Just giant.
But could cast smite on his fists. And had lay on hands, he could heal himself. And then I decided that's not enough healing. He needs more.
That's amazing. So, did you give him any kind of regeneration?
No, because
that would have been genius.
That would have been, but he had enough healing to kind of counteract it. He also had extra attack as well.
That's amazing.
Now, they fought the crocodile. It was awesome. The fight was so amazing. It was like in the swamp, and we had this whole map set out. It was the best boss fight I've ever had, probably. But, I let them know ahead of the time. I was like, hey, we're coming up on the last session. If you want to work, we're going to do like an epilogue thing after the boss fight. Tell me what you want your character to do, in the future, what your goals and whatnot and all that. And everyone came up with these epilogues, and they were awesome. The Kenku Sorcerer became a chaotic god of destruction.
Wow.
Yeah. Our divination wizard, Yona, died protecting an orphanage from her arch nemesis, Usador, another wizard or something like that. Our bard literally went to the forest, played a song, and became that song. Our ranger accidentally wound up in the abyss and became Doomslayer for a little bit.
Wow.
And he got Roger back, who was this squirrel that he had. And it was funny how he introduced this concept to his characters. He would just randomly say, "Man, I miss Roger." No one knew who Roger was. But he went to the abyss, found Roger, who is now like a giant dire squirrel.
Wow.
So he's riding that, and he's got a pet gorillion, the gorilla demon, with him. And yeah, so he's just being Doomslayer now.
Wow.
And what's even better is we had one character who played a warlock who was actually made a pact with the big bad evil guy before the game started, and that was part of their backstory. And like part of the deal was like, hey, I'll give you power if you give me your firstborn child. And so her like entire quest was to like pretty much get her child back, but like the kid had died or something, and so she like wanted revenge. I can't remember the exact details, but the ranger found the kid
and brought him back.
And so this mother character, like in her epilogue, died peacefully, got reunited in the afterlife with her husband and some of her other kids who had died. And then like knock on the door, who's that? It's your firstborn here in the afterlife. And he talks about, some weird guy with a musket and a squirrel and a pet gorilla demon rescued me.
Wow.
And it was awesome. It was truly awesome.
Well,
And
I guess
after these backstories, I was crying.
why do we still play? I mean, really, I've been playing for 5 years. You've been going right on at 6 or 7.
I think 8 at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, really, why do we still play? I mean, we talked about why we got into it, and I guess if you wanted to be just boring, we could say everything we just talked about is why we still play. But to get down to the nitty gritty, this game has always, of course, back in the 80s, there was the whole satanic panic.
Yeah.
Now, then it was only nerds. And now it's kind of in a cool zone thanks to Critical Role, who took
Stranger Things as well.
that takes these ideas and these people that are often specifically with Critical Role. Travis Willingham being this big jock that loves football
Oh yeah.
and just being excited for every Thursday night to sit down at a table and roll dice and help tell a story. I mean, outside of that kind of stuff, why are we still doing this?
Man, I'll be simple with you. You know, video games are fun. I play video games. But you know, there's some times where it's just, you know, the video game ain't scratching what I need. You know?
I know exactly what you mean.
And Dungeons and Dragons, for me, always scratches what I need. Because as a DM or even as a player, you kind of decide what kind of game it is. You know? Especially like as a DM, you know, it's kind of my role to set the tone of the game, to, you know, set the genre. And to me, it's a sense of like having control and this stability, and then you add in the emotional connection, you add in the good times with friends, you know, and it's in Dungeons and Dragons, you can do stupid stuff, and the consequences stay in the game pretty much.
Yep. This is and has been one of the greatest escapes from reality I've found. The potential to sit there and be anything you want for 3 to 6 hours at a time, to completely forget about everything that's going on. Maybe you're kind of short on bills this week, or your car's messing up, your job's not exactly going the way you want it to have the 3 to 6 hours and just forget about it all.
Yeah.
And if you're good at role playing and can kind of get into it, be somebody else for a little bit.
Yeah.
To somebody that can do things right, you know. That's a great feeling to have, and it's good to have that option there. And I like D&D more than I do video games. Now, of course, video games are great because you can actually see what's going on.
Yeah.
You have to have a really good imagination with Dungeons and Dragons because it's not happening in front of your eyes.
No.
But I've played through Diablo 3 hundreds of times. I've done every class. I've done every quest. I've done the same with Skyrim. I've done every race. I've done every build possible. I've done every quest possible. I've been playing D&D for 5 years, and I've barely touched the surface.
Yeah.
I haven't played every race or class. I haven't done every build. There's so many different things that I would like to be able to do as a character.
You haven't ran all the worlds as a DM.
Yeah, and oh god, no! I've been writing a homebrew for a year, and yeah, I've been writing a homebrew campaign for a year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just the endless possibility of Dungeons and Dragons is another beautiful thing about it. It brings people together to have a good story, have a good time,
and to experience a freedom in gaming.
Also,
very few other games give.
Yeah, I can talk in accents in Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't get looked at crazy.
Yeah, like my Australian accent is absolutely terrible. But when they walk into a shop and I say, "Good day, mate, what can I get for you?" They don't look at me like I'm stupid or make fun of me because it doesn't actually sound Australian. They met a guy last week that sounded kind of like a Russian.
Yeah.
We have a small problem in town. Nobody looked at me like I was dumb.
My character has a New Yorker, New Jersey accent. Kind of
that is
between
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, New Jersey, doesn't matter. Anyways.
Hey, I'm walking here.
It's fun, you know. That's the beautiful thing about Dungeons and Dragons. The character you make is a character you make.
Yeah, and even I know that I sound like a country hick because I've talked like this since I was 6, and I told myself that I will never change the way I sound because it's who I am. The character I'm playing in your campaign, Ford, is literally me, but a little slower. His S's are a little bit more drawn out, and it's more of a Texan Southern thing than it is North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something familiar but different.
Yeah. I'll tell you, we got on the topic of, escapes from reality, and we mentioned kind of like art.
Yeah.
And there's many different art forms out there. Painting, drawing, and there's different subgenres of those. Even writing is a form of art. Music. Storytelling is an art form. With Dungeons and Dragons, there's
all of it in one place.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to express yourself, express your ideas.
Maybe you're playing a bard like me. I played a bard. I also play guitar.
Yeah.
If I had wanted to get really into it and wasn't in a public place, I would have brought my guitar and sat there and plinked something and be like, just plink a little something. You have inspiration.
I have brought an instrument into a game of Dungeons and Dragons when I played a bard, and it's so fun. There's so many different ways to express yourself. Like the different art forms in D&D. As a DM, world building is an art. Crafting a world, crafting a story is an art.
Yep. Creating a character is
Yeah.
an art. Because maybe you're sitting there and you're realizing, what? I would really like to be able to fix things in real life. I'm useless when it comes to fixing things in real life. So you take your character and you're like, you know what? I'm going to have him be the handyman of the party. If the wheel falls off the wagon, he can fix it. If the forge goes down for something that's going wrong with it, he can rebuild it.
Yeah, art. It's an art form, and there's different ways it can be an art form. From the min-maxers wanting to build the most powerful character that they have ever seen, to the person who's wanting to build the most story-driven character that's ever been made. It's a way to express yourself, and honestly, with each character that I've ever played, there's always been a piece of me in that character.
Yeah.
And each world that I've ran as a DM, there's been a piece of me in that world. And I think in today's society, a lot of people are just looking for a way to show themselves and to be accepted.
Yep.
And when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you present a character, you got a piece of you in that character, and it gets accepted by the party, it's a beautiful thing. Or you run the world and the players love it. It's awesome.
Especially when you have the freedom of, I wouldn't suggest becoming a DM before playing in a few games.
Yeah.
Try and get an understanding for the rules. That way, where you mess up as a player, maybe if you have a newer player, he's like, hey, it doesn't really work like that. And you can be like, this is how it works. Of course, you can always have leniency on a lot of the rules. That's 5e has done a magnificent job of doing so.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a rules lawyer to play D&D.
Yeah.
Is that being able to sit down, and you don't have to plan your own campaign. There are plenty of guides like Grim Hollow.
There's modules too.
Lost Mines of Fendelver.
That's a good starter one.
Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Oh.
There's so many out there to help you.
Yes.
But there's a lot that you have to kind of come up in between.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff for characters, if they give you a good backstory and be like, okay, well, what kind of arc do I give this guy? What do I take from this guy to make his backstory or his progression a little darker for him to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel? There's so much brilliance in the liberties that you can take with Dungeons and Dragons, because you can go back and do something like Sword in the Stone to Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk's probably going to be a lot harder to plan than Sword in the Stone.
And also, not only Dungeons and Dragons, but we've talked about, like, there's other role-playing games out there to fit many different different genres.
Yep.
And honestly, the exploration of the possibilities with tabletop role-playing games, not just Dungeons and Dragons, is an adventure that you can take on your own and have a good time.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times, like me, I'm a numbers guy when it comes to the games, And I can't tell you how much fun I've had looking at other role-playing games that I'm never going to convince other people to play with, and looking at the numbers and be like, that is so cool. And I will take something that I like from that and implement it in my game.
Yep.
Just, I feel like we're going on and on and on, and we're just saying the same thing.
Pretty much.
Dungeons and Dragons is fun.
It is fun, and I promise you, if you give it a chance, and I mean a real chance, because I know the stigma that comes with it, if you allow yourself to just try it, realize that, this is pretty much a video game, but you get to experience it with more people instead of alone. It's one of the greatest things that we've been gifted with as far as a game.
Oh yeah. Now there are bad examples,
Of course,
but I feel like that's a topic for another day.
it is.